What comes to mind when you hear the word adventure? Many define it as crossing deserts, climbing mountains, or sailing across oceans. Others talk about it as visiting a new place, whether that's near or far. I don't disagree, but I also think adventure is more than this. I think, like today's guest has been saying for years, she's written a book on the subject, adventure is a fundamental human need. Belinda Kirk is an explorer, an author, a speaker, and one of the UK's leading advocates for the power of adventure. She's led expeditions across some of the world's most remote regions, travelled through deserts, jungles and mountains, and spent years helping people discover that adventure isn't reserved for a selected few, but for everyone. Hey, I'm Luke. I'm an author of archaeological adventure novels. I travel the world looking for stories to put into my books and to share with you right here on the Adventure Story podcast. Now, just quickly before we dive in, if you would like some more adventure in your life, I would love to welcome you inside of the Adventure Society. This weekly newsletter is your ticket to travel with me, to share my real-world adventures, and to find out first when a new story or a new season of this podcast drops. There's a link in the show notes to join the Adventure Society right now. So today we're talking about why, in a world where we're hyper-connected and yet disconnected from nature, adventure really matters. I'm thrilled to have this conversation with Belinda Kirk, because while we both come at adventure from very different directions, we're both fascinated by what it does to people. Belinda leads expeditions, she speaks and she runs events to encourage people to seek out adventure. My writing takes me around the world so I can capture that feeling of wonder and excitement in my books, just in the hope that it shows people what it's like to be there firsthand. I can't wait to explore why we both think, for different reasons I'm sure, adventure is quite so important. Belinda, welcome to the Adventure Story podcast.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Looking forward to having a chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me, what was the first moment that adventure first got hold of you and made you think, this is it? This is what I want to spend, my life doing, my time doing.
I think there was probably two times. I think as a child, I think we're born open to adventure. We answer our call to adventure a lot more easily, don't we? And then we kind of grow up and we get a bit sensible and we're told that adventure's frivolous and a luxury and it's like, why are you having another holiday? So I think I lost it, as many people do, and then I came back to it. I think that's happened. So it's probably twice that I realised that adventure is my deal. The first time was when I was probably 7 or 8 years old. I remember, probably before this, but this was one of my earliest memories. I was very lucky. I lived on an island called Alderney in the Channel Islands, between Britain and France. And they're very small, unpopulated islands where you can be a feral child. And the word feral was often used. And I thank goodness for that. That was something that my parents got right, bless them. I had a chance to be in nature. And I particularly remember freewheeling down hills on my bike. You know that feeling you get, that feeling of being alive. And I would go off on my bike all around the island and I had a secret garden. And I think the first time I was really an explorer was when I found my secret garden. And it was my secret and I kept going back to it and I thought there were fairies there and I thought there was all sorts of treasure. And of course it wasn't secret, but it was a little bit hidden, this garden, and it was rarely visited. I think it was a bit overgrown. It was a walled garden, a long walled garden that was overgrown and unloved and people didn't really go into it. So I always went there and found no one else there. So I just thought it was kind of secret. And I built shelters and I did all sorts of stuff there. I was just a kid, And because it was my own little land, I think there was something very powerful in that. I discovered it. I measured and recorded it. And I think that's where I was something at that point, some seed was planted that I became an explorer. And I think so many kids don't get a chance to do that. And when they do, it's magic. It's absolute magic. So I think that was probably the first time I feel like I was an explorer. And then again, it happened. Then later on, you go up, you go through puberty, you got all the teen years where it's rather difficult. I started to worry about what I looked like and doing my hair and going shopping and all that nonsense that we all do, I think, teenagers. And you get sucked into consumerism and God knows what. There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of external voices, isn't there? But then I found it again when I was about 15 and I went on a Duke of Edinburgh expedition, which is a youth development program that I signed up for. And it just blew my mind and it changed my life. And I mean, I could go into all of that story as well, but I found it again when I was 15 and I never let it go. After that point, I never let it go.
It's fascinating, isn't it? That sort of freedom, I suppose. There's an element of freedom there, isn't there? That you are unhooked from. You mentioned consumerism and fitting in and all of those things, and just sort of being away from that is perhaps the freedom, I wonder.
I think freedom and adventure are so almost interchangeable. It's such a large element of adventuring. It's such a large element of what we as humans need. We're nomadic hunter-gatherers. That's who we really are. You know, our DNA, we were evolved to, our DNA hasn't caught up to our modern lives. And we see a lot of physical disease, but I think we see a lot of mental disease because of that. We should be outside. We should be traveling in groups. There's this kind of nomadic lifestyle that we miss. I've gone off the point a bit maybe, but
No.
gosh, I've totally lost train of thought now.
No, do you know what? That's something I've often wondered because I travel a lot and I love to travel. And I've often felt in the sort of mainstream a little bit of an outsider in that sense, you know, because I don't look forward to going home. I don't feel like I quite know what that concept is in the same sense that a lot of other people do. You know, I don't have that same sort of feeling. And I wonder that. I think, you know, 5, 6, 10,000 years ago, whatever, there was no home. You were just out. You did what you did. That was life. And I wondered just what in the way that you've described, whether that's true, I suppose.
A lot of my theories and ideas I can prove with data. I can't prove this one, but it is what I believe. I think we are hunter-gatherers. We are built to be nomadic. So actually, I think everyone was born to feel that way. And if you look at children, that's how they are. They're curious. They like to explore. You know, it's all just going on a short walk with a young. I've got an 8-year-old now, but when he was younger as well, you know, everything's amazing. It's all about exploration and discovery. But your home is your group. Your home is your tribe. Your home is, you know, the people. So I think we've confused home with a house or land ownership or something. I don't know. I'm going off the point a bit maybe, but it's like, yeah, I think we are nomadic. We're supposed to be nomadic. I'm still very nomadic in my heart. Always will be. But people matter. And so, you know, relationships and people are the home that I need to. That's why I can't leave England really permanently, because all the people all family and friends are here. But I'd love to live in lots of other countries.
Yes.
But that's the bit. I need to bring everyone with me. I need to convince them all to live in vans and travel around.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean, and I feel this as well. So let's get back to the script, back to the sort of conversation that we're having. And what do you think happens then when this sense of adventure is dampened, when we don't have enough adventure? What happens both physically and mentally? What happens to us? How does that manifest?
I think a lot of things happen. The thing that comes to mind first is because of all the mental health problems that we see. Like, it is now normal in society. 1 in 4 people experience mental health during their life. I would say it's probably higher than that. That's maybe reported. I think everyone is either experiencing mental health problems or knows someone close to them that is experiencing mental health problems. And I think during your life, we all go through grief. We all go through challenges that we find maybe too much. But it's gotten to epidemic proportions. And so as far as what are we missing out on, I think a big part of it is that hunter-gatherers we're designed to live an adventurous life. An adventurous life means that we have these acute stresses. We're chased by a saber-toothed tiger, where we fall into a river, whatever. But then we get out of that situation. And that acute period of stress is short and sharp. But then we have all the relief And so life is like up, down, cortisol levels, stress levels, bang, 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 all the stress hormones. They go up and down with long periods of down, like long periods of rest. We're not living in a constant stress. But in England or in the Western world, or if not the whole world now, modern lifestyle means that we live in this chronic stress. It's all about paying the bills. It's about buying a house or getting a mortgage. It's about jobs and careers and will I get the promotion? It's passing exams, all that stuff. It's hugely stressful, but it's this chronic low-level stress that goes on for weeks, months, years. And that is really bad for us. And that is linked, that chronic level of cortisol and other stress hormones is what's linked to nearly all of our diseases of civilization, they're called, from diabetes to heart problems to all the mental health problems. So I think one of the major things is that we're supposed to live in this bouncy, exciting, changeable, challenging world with all this lovely periods of respite in the middle, whereas we're actually on this kind of flat line of just constant low-level stress. I think that's one of the main... I think that's the thing that's making the biggest impact. But also we're missing out on physical movement. We're missing out on all the community time. How many of us sit for hours every day not really being communal, but either in front of a screen or whatever. Even my son, if you look at schools, they spend hours sat in their desks being told stuff and being taught stuff rather than working collaboratively. And, there's different ways of teaching kids, and a lot of the majority of the way that schools are run, for example, it's very similar, is this idea that they all sit and listen. Or there's very little collaborative learning and work. So there's all sorts of things that are very different to how our body and our mind is designed to live. We're going against so much of it.
It sort of speaks to that element of fear, doesn't it? People become afraid of what's outside, of other people, of the dangers of whatever, all sorts of things. And of course there are dangers, but if you don't experience the dangers, you don't learn from the experience that you've had of that danger, I suppose.
Well, fear is a really interesting one, because fear is what dominates our politics, isn't it? Whether we're fearful of people in boats coming across the channel, or we're fearful of people in other countries and the nuclear threat, this fear is used to dominate us, I think, politically and therefore socially. I know we're going off point a bit, but yeah, I mean, and then at a very base level, if we live in a society based on where rule is based on fear, then that's kind of it seeps into everything. Whereas fear actually should be something that I found through adventuring. Fear is a hugely important and fantastic part of life. I feel that fear for me is my superpower. Fear is actually designed to prepare us to bring our best game. So if we have a healthy relationship with fear, we realize that feeling of fear, not chronic fear, we're talking about chronic fear, but immediate fear, getting up on stage and talking to people, or being in a kayak on the top of a bit of white water. It's a bit like, ooh, that fear prepares our body into fight or flight and prepares us to bring our peak performance. So fear is actually, it heightens your fear in the acute state, it heightens all your senses, it shuts down your digestion, pushes all the blood to your muscles. You're stronger, you're more alert, and you're ready for the challenge in front of you, which historically would have been a saber-toothed tiger. But in the moment now, for me, for example, might be getting on stage to talk to people, the scariest thing I think I'd do. Or you're on a cliff, you're just abseiling it. That moment when you abseil off the edge of that cliff. Have you done abseil? It's that moment just as you go over, when you're giving yourself to that rope. It's pure fear, but it is it's preparation. And you are in your best peak performance at that moment.
I love that. That's so true. And I think it's quite often spoken about fear in a negative way, isn't it? But you've put a sort of positive spin on that. Let's talk about some of your adventures then. Let's kind of get into some of the things that you've done. And tell me about some of the times that you have felt frightened, camping or abseiling or whitewater rafting or anything like that. When has that fear really taken you, and when has it really benefited you in an adventure setting?
The most frightened, there's a couple of things that spring to mind. So I rode around Britain. We were the first women to row around Britain, and I think even today there's only 14 people that have actually done it. It's very, very challenging. And what I didn't realise at the start, because hardly anyone only one other boat had ever done it when we did it. It's also very dangerous. I didn't realise how dangerous until we started.
Yeah.
We had gone halfway around Britain. It took us 52 days. It was extremely grueling. But we were in this tiny 24-foot boat, imagine. No engine, no sail. So you can only go as fast as your legs will push you pull you when you're rowing. You've only got arm and leg strength, 2 at a time. And so you're doing 1 or 2 knots max. And so if you get into trouble, you can't really get out of the way. And so we came round all the way around England, around Scotland, coming back down the other side near somewhere called Wick in Scotland. And we nearly got run over by a Russian tanker in the middle of the night. We saw the lights. We were screaming down the radio, "We can't move. We can't turn. We don't have we're just a rowing boat. We don't have the power to get out of your way. You have to turn." And I don't know, turning a tanker is not something that you can do in a split second. It takes time. And there was this guy on the other end, this Russian guy, who could hear us, but maybe there was a translation or accent problem. And he was like, no, really, we can't move. And by the time they went past us, he just turned in time. I remember it being, 50 foot away, and the huge wave that nearly tipped our little rowing boat over afterwards. That was terrifying because we had all this equipment on board, and we'd taken every precaution under the sun to make sure that we were seen by the big boats. And we had now come 3/4 of the way around Britain, and what I realised is, all that time, the equipment, something called the CME, that's supposed to make you come up on radar, that wasn't making us come up on all the radars. So all these ships that had missed us in those previous 40 days, it was just luck. Like, Britain has the busiest shipping lanes, or some of the busiest shipping lanes in the world, and we were crossing them like a little slug or a little snail trying to cross a motorway. And we would call the Coast Guard, we'd let them know, we'd let them all, let all the ships in the area know. And we had this equipment that's supposed to make us pop up, even though we're very small, pop up on radar. And then it made us realise that we'd come all the way around, and really we'd just been lucky. And that was a terrifying moment. I thought I was skipper, and I thought I was going to lose my crew at them. I thought they were all going to get off, and I thought that I was going to. We all had a bit of a time to think, this is not, the equipment's not doing what we thought it was doing. So that was a very scary moment. And definitely, I'm a mum now, and if I'd been in that moment with my little boy back at home, I would have got off the boat, because you have different responsibilities when you become a parent. But yeah, that was scary. And I say there's lots of snakes. They scare me. I've had snakes jump out. We've had camps around the place, and then you pick up a flower, like doing some biological work in a jungle somewhere, and you pick up a flower press, and there's a snake turned in. Or there was a great one, actually. We were in Tanzania in, what's it called? Gosh, my brain's gone. Anyway, there's some monsoonal forest, sort of south of Dar es Salaam, in Tanzania. And we'd cleared an area, made a camp, and we were doing all sorts of biological stuff, because I'm sort of a biologist by trade years ago. And we're doing this biological surveying. And we were all by the dinner thing that we'd built this table, and we were all having our dinner. We were all getting it ready. It was still light, because you're always obviously in the trees. You're always in your bed by dark. Anyway, someone picked up a jerry can of water, and this black snake darted out, and it started darting all over our camp. Everyone was jumping on top of anything they could. We had a science table and a dinner table, so that was what we'd built. So luckily there was something to jump onto, but not that high. And this was when I was really young. It was one of my first expeditions. I was probably only 19 or something. And the science leader, he whacked the snake a couple of times. And he went to try and chase it off. And then it reared up. At that point, because he realised he shouldn't have messed with this snake. It was a Mozambique spitting cobra. And it reared up and spat at him and hit him here. But that's because it's had its back broken, obviously, at least once when he hit it. And if he hadn't, it would have gone in. I mean, they're deadly accurate. We would have blinded him. That was scary because then it went darting into all of our mosquito nets where we all slept. And I'd just been in that mosquito net minutes before. And it got caught. If you imagine lots of mosquito nets hanging down under a tarpaulin, it got caught and went mad in there, like threshing around. If I'd been in the mosquito net at that point, I mean, horrifying. So I remember that was a big moment of like, why the hell am I here? And I was about 19 at the point. I think it's that was my first actually. My first overseas expedition. And I was like, whoa, yeah.
That's absolutely fascinating. But you did go back. But both of these adventures you've described, you've gone back and done other things. Why? What made you think I must do that again?
I've written literally a whole book about why adventure is good for us, Adventure Mind. And it's literally because I'm so intrigued at why we spend time, money, resources doing what everyone thinks is a holiday. I hate it when people say that. It's like, I'm not going on another holiday. It's an adventure. Bless. But yeah, we put, why have I 30 years of leading adventures and taking people on adventures and witnessing time and time again transformation, really changing people's lives for the better. Why is that? And why don't we talk about it? And what is going on? I've lost chain of thought. What was the actual question?
Yeah, so why did you go back? You were there 19 years old, this snake darting around everywhere. What made you think, oh, I really must do this again?
Yeah, no, quite right. So, yeah, what is it that makes it just addictive? I think, and as I say, there's a whole book on the benefits, and you feel you improve, you feel more confident, you feel like better self-awareness. I could talk for hours about the hundreds and hundreds of studies that show all the benefits of adventuring, because that's what I've been doing over the last 10 years, trying to collate and find and bring this to light. But you know what? Maybe it all comes down to, because this was the thing I heard the most when I interview people for my research. The thing that I hear the most is, I feel alive, or I feel most alive. And I think it's the same for me when it really comes down to, life is not about avoiding suffering, because there's always a little bit of difficulty, adversity when you step into the unknown, when you step into uncertainty. It's uncomfortable. It's the very nature of it. But it's where you live. This is where you feel alive. And life, this is the stuff you remember. This is the stuff that buoys you up. And this is ancient knowledge. The Stoics, Nietzsche, Darwin, they all touch on this idea as well, that life is not about finding easy ways or the easiest way. It's not about comfort. It's about uncomfortable, actually. It's about, not all the time. We need to have comfort. We need to have our comfort zone. But the magic in life, just the magic, the sparkle, is when you feel alive. And that always involves a moment or two or week or so or whatever of stepping into the unknown and being uncomfortable. So, yeah, adventure is all about being alive, I think.
Do you think then adventure has to be uncomfortable? Could it be, we talk a lot about adventure like rowing around Britain, right? Like you did, or climbing a mountain or whatever, great. I don't really do those sorts of things that much, but I still think I go on adventures, but I'll go to a city I've never seen, or I'll walk through a different market, or I'll go to what does adventure mean to you, I suppose, is what I'm getting at. What do you think it really is?
I think adventure has to have an element of challenge, uncertainty, and therefore adversity does come along. So there's always a moment, an element of uncomfortable. Essentially, if you're just doing the same things and you're hanging out in the same way with the same people, have the same ideas of you, this is everything in life, If you think of the comfort zone model,
Sure.
It's a really good way of explaining it. If you think of that as a circle around you, that's your familiar. Everything that's familiar to you, everything you understand and know, all the friends that have the same opinions, all the going to work the same way every day, doing stuff that feels safe and familiar. That's your comfort zone. That's great. You need that, and that is a good place to be. But if you only reside there, life is narrow. When you step out of your comfort zone, you step out into the stretch or learning zone. And that's when you learn a new language, start a podcast, write a book, go on an adventure. You do something that is uncomfortable because you're going into uncertainty. And uncertainty is, by its very nature, uncomfortable. It has to be, because there's lots of good things on the other side, but there's also lots of things that could harm or be difficult or challenging or upset you. So when you step out into the stretch zone or the learning zone and out of the comfort zone, that's where you learn. That's where you grow. That's where personal growth happens. And what's wonderful, I think, in the key part that is often not talked about with the comfort zone model, is that you don't just then step back into your comfort zone model. Back into your comfort zone. The comfort zone stretches to where you are. And therefore, the circle around you, the life that you lead, is broader. What you're used to, what you're comfortable with, what your experience in life is bigger and wider. Your life is richer. And you also get hooked. You get hooked on that feeling. So you need to then have time in your comfort zone to assimilate all that you've learned and to kind of let it all settle in. And then when you're next ready, you want to step out. You want to find that feeling again. You want to feel alive. You want to find out what you're capable of and what the world looks like on the other, in that other little place you talked about, looking around these cities and stuff. You want to find out who the people are there and what they're doing and what it looks like, because that's the joy of living. But you know that there's uncertainty in there, because that's the whole point of it. There's some difficulty stuff. There'll be stuff that, it's difficulty there, but that's where all the magic is.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right, and express that in a really good way. Now, you talk about adventures quite a lot, and you write about adventures as well. I write about adventures, and I'm wondering, what do you think it is that captivates us to share adventure stories? So not just go on them, but talk about them, right? Why does that story that you've described about the snake, or the one about the being run over by the ship, why is that so captivating when you tell that on stage or you tell that on a podcast? What do you think makes those adventure stories so interesting?
I mean, humans, we live on stories. As hunter-gatherers, everything to do with how the history of the tribe and how everything works is all based on stories. We're storytelling and story-listening creatures. So I think it's very primal. I also think that we need inspiration. It's a really good question. Why do we need to send people to the moon? Do we really need this sort of stuff at the moment? For example, like thinking big adventure, or even to the poles or whatever. There's a carbon footprint to all of it. But we need to inspire ourselves. We need to feel that the world can change. We need to feel that we have power to make change and that the world can be different. And so I think inspiration is a really important part of it. And I think the reason we do it is, we want to also, on another level, so many of us, we get something out of adventure that we can't always put into words, but we want to share that with others. When you find something that is wonderful, you want to tell other people. I'm an evangelist around adventure because it changed my life. It's very simple. It's changed my life, and I've seen it change other people's lives. So why wouldn't I want to tell people about it? I mean, maybe the stories that I've just shared aren't the right ones. I can tell you stories. And let me tell you about a story that is, I think, important, because it's about how small adventures can change somebody's life, and therefore you should go out, or your listeners should go out and do something. So there was this young man, Sam, a teenager who'd had a lot of trouble, a lot of challenges in his life, and his anxiety and depression had gotten to the point where he had actually become a selective mute, which means that physically he was able to speak, but he'd stopped speaking and he could no longer speak. And as you can imagine, that was very hard for him and his family. And he had years of them trying everything, CBT and all sorts of other therapies. And they were a bit of a loss because they couldn't seem to help Sam. And they heard about this pilot project to do 6 weeks of surf therapy. And they thought, well, it's not going to create miracles, but it's going to let him be a kid. It's going to let him have some fun and just feel fun and be a kid for a bit. So they signed him up. And for 6 weeks, they could see a change in Sam. little bit more lively, a little bit more light in his eyes. And every day he'd twice a week he'd go and he'd fall off his board and he'd get back up again. And every time you do that, you build resilience. And those are the gifts you take to the rest of your life. He was experiencing all these positive emotions as well. And there's a theory by Barbara Fredrickson and a lot of evidence to say if you bank positive emotions like the feeling of awe and seeing wonderful, beautiful landscapes and being in nature and all of these sorts of things, and trust in the people that he's his instructor and the people that are going through the course with him. You're banking on these positive emotions. So there's all these positive things, little by little, building up. And on the last day, his parents came down to watch. They could see a change, and they wanted to see him on his last day of this surf therapy course. And he was in the waves with his instructor, and he just suddenly started speaking to his instructor. And his parents came up to Joe, who set up that surf therapy pilot project. This was 15 years ago, before it's much more mainstream now, thank goodness. And his parents just said, "Thank you for giving us back our son." And that was 6 weeks of surfing that opened a door that then led, a lot of healing is about finding the key to open just a step in the right direction. And then other therapies can also be involved. But you need something that's going to bring you out of where you are. And for a lot of people, adventure is the most natural way of doing it, I think. And Sam went on to keep surfing and all sorts of positive moves in his life and continue to speak. So, just something little like that can make such a change. So that's why we want to surf. That's why we want to do adventures.
And that's so fantastic, isn't it? In a world where we talk about medications and we talk about older people self-medicating with caffeine or alcohol or whatever they use, to make themselves feel, chocolates to make themselves feel a little bit better on a daily basis. And you're saying that just something that's so simple, not that it's simple, it's setting up a scheme like that is incredibly complicated, I can imagine, but sort of just changing your environment and doing something different is the strength there. What if someone wants some more adventure in their life, but they don't know where to start and they haven't got a scheme like you've described there? Where's a good sort of low barrier to entry, something you can try, something that doesn't perhaps involve climbing a mountain, although it might, or it might lead to that. What's the first step, you think, on the process for someone who is intrigued by our conversation today?
It's a really good question. And I think the point of the surfing story is that, yes, that's a complicated system to have to set up because working with young people and everything else. But it's about the fact that it's just getting down to the beach and going surfing. And okay, we don't all live near the coast, and surfing isn't cheap to hire kit and stuff, but it is accessible to some. So there's a wonderful thing you can do. But I think also you've picked up on the fact that small steps and introductory steps, the smaller they are, the easier it is to do, the more likely we're going to do it and not get stopped along the way by thinking, oh, I can't afford the time or the money, I can't get there, it's too complicated, I haven't got the skills. There are some really good things you can do. Camping is a great one. You can camp in your garden, start there. It's a totally new experience. Or if you haven't got a garden, camp in a friend's garden. Totally, but it doesn't cost anything. Borrow a tent. If you enjoy that, then you can start going to a campsite, or then, really, really fun is go wild camping. Find somewhere you can wild camp. In Britain, that's Dartmoor in Scotland. But also some of the areas in the other national parks, you can wild camp above the tree line and stuff. So you need a bit of kit, but I always think, you can borrow stuff. It's amazing. So many people have tents that they only use once a year, or sleeping bag, whatever. Try and do that. But even smaller than that, wild swimming. There's some great wild swimming groups. Jump in a river, jump in a lake. If you're in London, there's the Serpentine. There are places where you feel adventurous. Yes, you feel cold as well. There's also a lot of health benefits to cold water immersion. I love swimming. I swim in the cold up the road from our house. I swim in the river there twice a week, all through the year. And Every day I jump in the river is a good day. I think the benefits are mostly for my mental health, but there are also supposed to be loads of physical benefits as well. And there's a reason people do it. Again, might not be for everyone. Because I do think also you need to think, well, what is it that is calling me? What fits me? What sounds fun? You can get a geocaching app on your phone. Geocaching is, you can do that for free. You can have there's a paid version as well, obviously, because they've got to make some money out of it all. But you can do a free version. You can go around your city, town, or countryside around you, and you can go and find. It's so exciting. I do it with my son. He absolutely loves it. And we're actually making our own little geocaches. They're just little pots, little waterproof pots or pots that you've got a little sign or stamp that you've put there. You can put a little trinket in and swap. It's the excitement of finding it. It's a treasure hunt, basically. I mean, what more fun and why not? The kids love it. The adults love it. I love it as well. I love going treasure hunting. I mean, why wouldn't you? It costs nothing. I mean, it costs petrol or getting to a place. But well, no, actually, you can walk out of your door and, in most cities and towns have geocaches as well. Oh, gosh, parkour. I'm a massive fan of parkour. My little boy does parkour. It's an expression of freedom. We were talking about freedom before. Like, there's sport, and sport has a great place to help people, and sport is great. But adventurous sport, like climbing, like go to a climbing centre, again, a little bit expensive, I know. It can be tricky to do regularly. Parkour is an expression of freedom. That's the definition of parkour. It's about going through your environment in your way. It's about finding your authenticity. Wow, what an adventure. I think, yeah, if I'd found parkour as a younger person, I might have gone well into it, although I might break my arm a couple of times, but sometimes that happens. So there's a lot of things out there. I don't know. There's a few ideas. Be inventive. Once you start, you'll see adventure everywhere.
Yes, I think you're right. Once you take that step out the front door and see whatever's going on. And there's always things, isn't there? There's, even things like the park runs or the local organisations that have this, particularly if you live in a bigger town or a bigger city, they have all sorts of societies and groups that do, that do everything, don't they?
Yeah, there's loads of Facebook groups and stuff, isn't there? And Meetup and stuff like that, where some of it's paid for, some of it you can do for free. You were talking about running. I like running, but I love running. I call it exploratory running. I like to run different routes. I like to go in heavy rain. I like to feel it's exciting, and if you get lost a bit, as long as you don't get really lost, have a backup, some money for a bus or something, or a phone to kind of phone partner. I'm somewhere on the moors. Yeah. Can you come and get me?
Pick me up.
Don't go the same running route every day. Of course you'll get bored of it. I mean, who wouldn't? When I lived in Bristol, I used to explore Bristol by running. And I'd get a bus to the start and then do this. And I'd always try and I found my city in I discovered a totally different city. And I loved it. It's a really exciting thing. It's discovery and surprise. And yeah, so you can run adventurously, for example, or just walk if you don't run.
Yeah. I listened to a podcast some time ago about a guy who spent several years walking every single street of New York City. It took him years and years to walk every single street because he wanted to, as you said, to have seen everything that's there. And you realise how many places in your vicinity that you've lived for ages that you just don't see, that you've just never been to.
He's an adventurer.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, Belinda, this has been fantastic. I always finish the podcast with the same question because we're talking about adventure stories. Looking back, what adventure stories, whether they were books or movies or legends or campfire stories or whatever, first inspired you and sparked your imagination to think, I must go out there and do this?
I think it was probably Fiona Campbell walking around the world. She's not very well remembered. Sportswomen aren't as well recognised as male sportsmen. And I know sport isn't adventure, but it's maybe in the same ilk. She is the first person to walk around the world. When I was a teenager, all the explorers were men, all of them. And, that's great. We need white men with beards on top of the mountains. They're out to adventure just the same as everyone else. But as a woman or as a girl, I couldn't hardly ever see. There's brilliant now because there's loads more female adventure icons, but there really weren't any. And then Fiona Campbell walked around the world and it blew my mind because I was like, if she can do that, maybe I can, maybe not walk around the world, but women can do that stuff too. She was a wonderful inspiration. Yeah. So it would definitely have to be Fiona Campbell.
Wonderful. I will check that out for sure, for sure. Belinda, this has been fantastic. Where can people find you and the things you do, and your TED Talk, which I watched and thought was fantastic, online?
Yes, I suppose to find my TED Talk, you look up Belinda Kirk TED Talk. That's about why, specifically around young people and young adults, children, and how adventure can be so amazingly good for confidence. I have written a book, Adventure Mind. It's also named Adventure Revolution in the UK. It's named Adventure Mind in the US, but it kind of gets swapped here and there. So the book is all about why adventure is so good for us. It's based on 30 years of leading groups and 12 years of researching and wanting to spread this message, really. And it will hopefully inspire you, or if you have a friend who needs to be inspired, to get out and do more adventure. BelindaKirk.com and adventuremind.org are the websites. And also, if you're looking for teammates to do some crazy adventure and all your friends are going, why do you want to do that? And you want to find someone who goes, yeah, I'll walk across that desert. I know a man with a camel or whatever. Then explorersconnect.com. It's free to join the newsletter and to have a look at loads of people looking for teammates who want to go and do big adventures. So, and also on Instagram, I'm Explorer Belinda.
Belinda, that was wonderful. Thanks so much. This is the Adventure Story Podcast. Thank you so much for hanging out today. I absolutely love conversations like this one. I feel so inspired by them, and it just makes me want to go and explore more and encourage more and tell more people about it. If you think, Belinda and I touched on a lot of topics in the episode today. If you think you know someone, or you know someone who you think might benefit from this episode, please do share it. Where you're both helping me because you're sharing the podcast, but also you might encourage someone to get that adventure that they really, really need. If you need more adventure in your life as well, let's be honest, I think you probably do. I think we all probably do. You might want to join the Adventure Society. This is my weekly newsletter, and it's your ticket to travel with me to share my real-world adventures and to find out first when a new story or a new season of this podcast drops. LukeRichardsonAuthor.com/Adventure Society, or there's a link in the show notes. And if you're a fan of adventure stories, a bit like the ones we've talked about today, check out my books, LukeRichardsonAuthor.com. Bon voyage, enjoy the adventure, and I'll see you next time.